My wife just asked for an open marriage. About 7 hours ago, my wife hit me with 5 words that, in my gut, I knew would lead us toward divorce. I want an open marriage. Now, I'm here hoping for advice, looking for any insight on polyamory or open relationships. What's really going on in her head? What questions should I be asking her as we navigate what I'm sure will be some long, hard conversations ahead? I'm completely lost and need help. I'm 29, she's 33, and we've been married for 3 years. We don't have any kids. In the 5 years we've been together, she's never once brought up anything about being interested in polyamory or open relationships. When she sat me down earlier today for the talk, I could sense something wasn't right. I tried my best to stay open-minded and supportive, but nothing could have prepared me for what she was about to ask. So I asked her, what's brought this on? She told me it's a feeling she's had for a while. She said there have been a few guys in the past that she had real chemistry with, but she never acted on it because of me. The hurt in her voice as she tried to explain cut deep. My head was spinning the entire time, but as I looked at her, with her red, swollen eyes and tear-streaked cheeks, all I wanted to do was reach out, hug her, and tell her I loved her. But I didn't. I just let her sit there, rambling on about her reasons. We were both falling apart in our own ways, and I could hear the agony in her shaky voice, see the tremor in her hands. It made me feel even more miserable and helpless. For a second, I thought her pain was even worse than mine, so I tried to comfort her the best I could, but honestly, neither of us was finding any peace in the moment. My wife is stunning, beautiful both inside and out. Naturally, I know men are going to chase after her. For context, I'm punching above my weight. If I'm a solid 5, she's off the charts, a 12. I'm not the jealous type, and I never had the luxury to be. I knew I had to keep my cool to stay with someone as attractive as her. There've been countless times since we've been together that I've watched guys flirt with her, at her job, at bars, coffee shops, concerts, you name it. I'd see them trying their luck when I wasn't right there next to her. And yeah, she liked the attention, but it never got to me because I always knew she'd turn them down out of respect for me. I got used to it. She's got this contagious laugh that could pull anyone in, like a siren song, and a way about her that would melt even the hardest of hearts. A simple touch from her fingers could put anyone under her spell. But the idea of an open marriage? That was a line I couldn't cross. She kept explaining, saying she needed more variety. She wanted to do things in the bedroom that she either didn't want to or couldn't do with me, her husband. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt small and insecure when it came to my wife's sexual appetite. Just to give you more background, she's been with more people than I have, me with 2 partners, her with 21, and that includes some group experiences, something I've never done. Still, I'm not the jealous type. I told her that yeah, sure, I'd love to sleep with different women too, but realistically, that's not happening, with or without her in my life. We've always been adventurous together, trying out each other's kinks, but it's always been just the 2 of us. So when I asked what exactly she wanted sexually from this open marriage idea, she couldn't give me much detail, other than wanting more threesomes with 2 men, which she apparently enjoys. I said I'd be okay with another guy joining us for a threesome every now and then, but only if we could also bring in another woman. That's when she quickly changed the subject. My wife isn't against the idea of being with another woman, but in all the years I've known her, she's never been comfortable with any kind of affection toward females, not even a friendly cheek-to-cheek kiss. Then she drops another bombshell, telling me she's felt like something's been missing in her life, that there's been this void inside her long before we ever met, and she thinks an open marriage will fill that gap. I couldn't help but ask why she never brought this up before. I mean, we've always been open with each other, sharing everything, our dreams, our worries, and always trying to build each other up when one of us felt unsure. I told her if she'd mentioned this back when we were dating, maybe we could have explored it, but now? No, not right now. I've settled into married life with her, and all I want is this monogamous relationship we've built. I don't want to be out there dating again, and to be honest, I'm not even good at that stuff. Charming and flirting with women was never my strong point. Now, if you're wondering how a guy like me, who's pretty much a geek, ended up married to someone as beautiful as her, it's kind of a wild story. She was being harassed by some guy in a parking lot, and things got physical. He was bigger than me, but I sucker punched him and kicked him where it counts. The guy ended up with jail time, and I got acquitted. That incident sparked a friendship, though it didn't turn romantic until I won this pretty big contest. I won't say what it was, but let's just say it had to do with politics. You know what they say, women love a winner. I told her straight up that I wasn't comfortable with changing our marriage into something else, especially since this wasn't what I signed up for. I reminded her that she's the love of my life and the future mother of my children, and I'd do anything to make her happy. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it's true, I really do want her to be happy. I'm just not sure the direction she wants to go in is one I can handle. I also asked her, aside from the sex part, what kind of relationship was she looking for with this open marriage? She wasn't too clear about it, but she hinted at wanting something long-term with multiple partners. For the next few hours, she kept asking me what it would take to make me feel okay with this, what kind of boundaries I'd want to set. Most of my answers were, I don't know, because I really didn't. I couldn't even think straight. The few things I did manage to suggest were that our marriage had to come first above any other relationship she had. I also said if we were doing this, everyone needed to practice safe sex. She's on birth control, and I don't use condoms when we're together, but I made it crystal clear, there's no way she's getting pregnant by another man or having some other guy's kid while we're married. This brought up the topic of starting a family, and that's when she hit me with the worst thing I heard all night. She wanted to try the open marriage first before we even thought about having kids. That's when I completely broke. I had done my best to keep it together, but hearing that was like the final blow. It was like everything inside me just drained away. I felt like an empty pitcher of water, shattered on the floor. That was the first time my wife had ever seen me like that, and if I could erase any moment from my life, it'd be that one. If I could control it, I'd never let her see me in such a state again. By this point, we were both crying and just a mess. She kept telling me how much she loves me and that wouldn't change, that we just need to put off starting a family for a little while. That's all, she said. She tried to hug me, to comfort me, but as soon as I felt her arms tighten around me, I just couldn't take it anymore. I got up and walked away. I felt crushed. There were too many thoughts running through my head all at once. I wandered around the house, trying to kill time, waiting for her to fall asleep. I ended up sitting in the bathroom for what felt like forever, just avoiding her, while everything she'd said played over and over in my mind. When I knew for sure she was in bed, I slipped out of the house and drove straight to my parents' place. I needed space, and I needed to figure things out. I ended up diving into research, trying to learn everything I could about polyamory and open marriage. Even as I sit here writing this, I'm still struggling to wrap my head around it all. At first, I was just jotting down my thoughts, but it's turned into this long post. The sun's about to come up, and I've already called in sick for work. Now, I'm going to try to catch a few hours of sleep. Sorry this is so long, but I needed to get it off my chest. I'll keep you all updated. Any advice would mean the world to me. Let's check out the comments. If you're looking to make an open or poly relationship work, you've come to the right place for advice and tips. But from what you've shared, it doesn't sound like you're really interested in this. Let's not ignore the obvious. You mentioned she's a 10 and you're a 5, so you're probably aware that if she goes ahead with this, she could be with 25 guys by the end of the year, maybe more, especially considering the kind of sexual experimentation she's into. If you're a 5, like you said, and you stay in this open marriage for a decade, chances are you'll still only have had 2 partners, especially since she doesn't seem to be on board with FFM swinging or anything like that. If you move forward, you need to prepare yourself to live with this reality. Let's read more comments. Another thing to consider, no matter what, you're going to have less time with her. While she's out on dates, you'll probably be at home. Right now, maybe you spend Fridays together, watching TV, ordering takeout, catching a movie. Soon, you might find yourself doing those things alone, maybe once a month, maybe every Friday. Waking up on Sunday mornings by yourself will likely become a regular thing, especially if she's serious about having deep, romantic relationships with multiple partners. This won't happen every Sunday, but these are realistic examples of what you might face, no matter what rules or boundaries you set. It sounds like you already know where this is heading, and I'm truly sorry. Your marriage seems to be unraveling, and it's heartbreaking. But only you know what you can live with. From what you've shared, it seems clear that you can't accept this situation. But don't lose hope, even for someone who considers themselves a 5, there's someone out there who will love you for just being you. If you do try to make this work, you'll need to face the likelihood of what I just said. Be real with yourself, think hard about how this will affect you, and decide what level of heartbreak you're willing to tolerate. Update: My wife asked for an open marriage, Part 2. Hi, everyone. It's been over a month since I made my first post about the night my wife brought up an open marriage. I'm creating this new post because Part 1 is getting a little old, and all the updates I've made are scattered, making it hard to follow the story. So, here's where we stand now. To summarize, I ended up hiring a private investigator to see if my wife had been cheating, but no evidence of that came up. Still, my trust in her has taken a big hit. We had started seeing a marriage counselor, but after a couple of sessions, I decided to stop because I wasn't happy with the therapist. Believe me, that's putting it lightly. If you're interested, go check out Update 4 for the details. I went on the hunt for a new counselor and found one with a solid reputation. She charges a pretty penny and is in high demand, so it took a few weeks, but we finally had our first session. That first meeting was mostly just laying out the basics of our problem. I wasn't planning on sharing what was said during therapy, but I think it's important to give a full picture, so I'll share some details. A week later, we had our second session with the new therapist, and right off the bat, I could tell the vibe was different from our first counselor. This guy asked a lot of questions, some to each of us individually, and some to both of us as a couple. Unlike the first therapist, who just let my wife go on these long-winded speeches, he made her keep things more focused and to the point. I've got to say, that really helped me understand things better. Just to give you an idea of how different these two therapists were, with the first one, I once asked my wife straight up if she had cheated on me or if there was someone she had in mind that she wanted to cheat with. She wouldn't even give me a yes or no. Instead, she'd go off on some long story, completely avoiding my question, and the therapist didn't seem to care. The counselor would pick up on something my wife said, usually about how she felt unfulfilled, and run with that, ignoring the main thing I'd asked. She even scolded me a few times for not listening to my wife's needs. But when I asked that same question again with the new therapist, my wife tried to ramble her way out of it again. That's when the therapist paused her and asked her to cut to the chase and answer my question. And because of that, I finally got the answer that had been slipping through my fingers. At first, she was dodgy, but eventually, she admitted that there were a few guys she had thought about approaching if we opened up our marriage, 3 guys, to be exact. And here's the kicker, they were all co-workers. But she made sure to mention they worked in different regions and departments. At that point, she refused to go on and just broke down, crying into her hands. I sat there next to her, watching as she sobbed uncontrollably. As a husband, my first instinct was to reach out and comfort her, to protect her, to make her feel safe. My heart wanted to do it, but my arms wouldn't move. The therapist was the one who handed her a tissue. After wiping her eyes, she glanced at me briefly, and I could feel we were both wondering the same thing: had I finally stopped loving her? She managed to pull herself together a little and continued talking. She explained that she only saw these men about 4 times a year and swore she'd never had any private conversations with them. According to her, they had no clue about her wanting to sleep with them. All their interactions had been in public, with other people around. I couldn't help but ask, why them? She told me it was because they were good-looking and funny. She'd also heard from other women at work that these guys had been involved in office flings before. And then she finally gave me their names. Turns out, I actually knew 2 of them and had spoken with them a few times. But even after hearing all this, part of me still didn't fully believe her. The 2 guys I had spoken to had both complimented me on how lucky I was to have such a great wife. And here I was, sitting in therapy, listening to my wife admit she had fantasies about them. Some sessions, she'd cry, and other times, she'd be completely stone-faced. But all her stories followed the same pattern. It's all I've been hearing from her since we started therapy. By the 3rd session, I'd already grown used to hearing my wife talk about how random men could set her heart racing and ignite her primal urges. By the time she was on her 8th story, I had pretty much stopped listening. And believe me, there were a lot more stories to come. They were all basically the same. She'd run into some handsome guy, whether at the bank, grocery store, or our usual coffee shop. They'd flirt for a few days, and eventually, the guy would work up the nerve to ask her out. She'd say no because she's married, but then she'd spend weeks fantasizing about what could have been. I know what a lot of you are probably thinking, my wife must be a sex addict. That was my first thought too. But every therapist we've seen has said the same thing, because she hasn't actually acted on her desires and has shown self-control. What she's likely dealing with is something called hypersexual tantalization. It's kind of like what teenagers go through, but they usually grow out of it as they get older. Adults going through a midlife crisis also experience these intense fantasy urges. So, either my wife's hitting her midlife crisis early, or she's still stuck with the sexual impulses of a teenage girl. Hearing your wife say she wants to sleep with every attractive guy she meets and then ask for your blessing is not exactly the Valentine's Day you hoped for. Valentine's Day had always been a big deal for us. In the past, we used to do fun, spontaneous things. One year, we went skinny dipping at the beach. Another year, we snuck into a coat room during an exclusive party and had sex. And just last year, we rented a private jet to fly to Japan, with the entire cabin to ourselves. But this Valentine's Day was different. It was the first one after she'd asked for an open marriage. Our date was pretty normal on the surface. We went out, had a nice evening, but when we got home, she made the first move, and we ended up having sex. That was the first time we'd been intimate since she dropped the open marriage bombshell on me, and it was the longest we'd gone without being together like that. Honestly, though, it didn't feel the same, at least not for me. The passion just wasn't there. I had taken a few days off work, and we spent the time mostly at home, just lying low. A lot of that time I spent thinking about everything that had happened over the past week and all the things she'd said in therapy. I still don't know where I stand. We're both trying to be martyrs in this marriage, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to make the hard decision. I believe her when she says she'll never ask me for a divorce, but she's willing to give me one if that's what I want. It tears me apart to see her like this. The woman I fell in love with had this bright spirit, this energy and joy that fueled me. But now, it's like all that's been drained away, and she's just a shadow of who she used to be. And that's what hurts the most. If I truly love her, maybe the right thing to do is to let her go, give her the freedom to be who she is, even if that means we have to part ways. Let's check out the comments. Continued. Your wife, no offense, sounds like a nightmare. I'm really sorry you're going through this. Honestly, it sounds like she's engaging in hypergamy, trying to trade up for something better. Get your ducks in a row, hire a lawyer, and don't tip her off about your plans until you've got everything squared away. Good luck. Honestly, just go for a divorce. I don't see how you two can move forward from here. It's clear you don't want an open marriage, and she does. Thanks for the update. Your first therapist sounds terrible. Why did your wife have to share all her fantasies with you during therapy? That seems like something that should have been between her and the therapist. There's no reason for you to have to sit through all of that. Did you feel uncomfortable hearing her fantasies? If you did, that's a big red flag. Therapy should be a safe space for both partners. If you spoke up about being uncomfortable and it was ignored, that's borderline malpractice.